Thank you for tuning in to the best parenting show on the internet, Post Daily Dose.
It's the Post. It's the Post. It's the Post. The Post Daily Dose. It's the Post. It's the Post. It's the Post. The Post Daily Dose. It's the Post. It's the Post.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Post Daily Dose. With me, your trusted parenting advisor, faithful guide, and servant on the healing journey. What's my name? Big Papa Brian+Post. In tonight's episode, I'm going to give you one very powerful parenting technique, one very powerful parenting tool that every parent needs to have and be using. And I am also going to talk to you about the power of nonverbal communication. But before I do that, I apologize for being late. I was watching football, watching Alabama win. Go Sooners. Sooners won today, so very excited about that. And all the big fans here in Oklahoma. But many of you don't know, in an earlier life, I actually played college football. In fact, when I was in the first grade, Mrs. Woods went around the room and asked every student, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I said, I want to be a professional football player. And so that was my goal and my dream all the way up till college. And then once I got to college, the reality set in that I was nowhere near the level of athleticism as some of those gentlemen were, and that I needed to do something else. So I became a social worker. Imagine that. And so here we are doing Post Daily Dose after all that. But it was a good day of football. So let's get down to business. Tiffany Field is a biology researcher. She's a psychologist at the University of Miami. And she runs an institute on touch. It's the Touch Institute at the University of Miami. You can actually look it up. A lot of really good research, but she did a study, and this is a really powerful study. She took, and you have to visualize this for a moment. She took 2 infants, and she hooked the infants up to brain monitors. The monitors looked exactly the same when the depressed parent walked towards her baby versus when the healthy parent walked away from her baby. I'm going to say that again. So it was a research study on the power of nonverbal communication, stress communication. The brain monitors of these infants looked exactly the same when the depressed parent walked towards her baby versus when the healthy parent walked away from her baby. So what that told us, and I think this was probably one of the first studies of its time, was that even without saying a word, we communicate a stress vibration. And depression and emotional absence in parenting is such a big thing. That's the form of trauma. I believe emotional absence and parental depression are the 2 most pervasive forms of trauma in our society. And they are the least studied and the least understood, because from a scientific standpoint, you can't see it. And because you can't see it, scientists don't always believe it exists. But that study by Tiffany Field demonstrated that a depressed parent walking towards their child actually sent off a vibration of stress. The infant's brain actually became stressed. Whereas the normal parent, when they got up and walked away from their baby became stressed. Because in a healthy parent-child relationship, the infant would want the connection with the parent. So just imagine if every time your parent walked towards you, you actually felt some level of anxiety and some level of stress. Well, that could potentially be going on in your home. And I know that's going on in some homes, and we don't always realize it, especially when it comes to the turtle children. I call them turtle children because a lot of times we place a lot of focus on children who are hyperactive or aggressive, who act out and who verbalize and yell. And then the child who doesn't get a lot of attention is the hypo-aroused child. See, the brain responds to stress in one of 2 different ways. It either becomes hyper-aroused or it becomes hypo-aroused. In fact, research says there are 2/3 more girls diagnosed as hypo-aroused and depressed, and 2/3 more boys diagnosed as hyper-aroused and aggressive, hyperactive. So what happens is that with hypoaroused children, the way they receive stress and the way they process stress is in a hypoaroused capacity. So when they become stressed, they shut down, they internalize. I call them turtle children because it reminds me of when I was a boy. I grew up in the country, it's a little town called Mountain View, beautiful little country town. And I could walk out, in fact, right next to our yard was this huge, 100 acre open field. And then there was a pond on down at the end of the field. So there was little critters all the time passing through. And every now and then I'd walk out in the front yard and there'd be a little turtle, walking across the grass. And I would go, a 9, 10-year-old kid, I'd run out and I'd grab the turtle and I'd say, "Hey, Mr. Turtle, hey, it's me, Brian. We're going to be friends." And what would the turtle do? He would shut down and go into his shell. Well, that happens in some of your homes with parents. Is we can become so anxious to connect with our children that we overwhelm them with our energy and then they shut down. And so then we feel more challenged, especially if you have rejection issues as a parent. That's one of the things that your child can stir up for you by shutting down and not wanting to connect. So you get your rejection issues stirred up, which then makes you more anxious, which then makes you go after them even more. So what I learned as a little boy is that I would have to set the turtle back down. Because as long as I was holding him, as long as I was in his presence, he was going to stay in that shell. So I would have to set him back down and I would have to wait. And I would wait. And eventually he'd pop out of his shell. Slowly look around. And I'd be down right over him sometimes, right beside him sometimes. And I'd just be looking at him. And he'd start to crawl again. And I'd say, "Hey, Mr. Turtle. It's me, Brian. We're going to be friends." And he'd pause for a minute, but then he'd start crawling in. Then I could touch his shell. Then I could touch his shell a little more. And once he got acclimated to me, once we got acclimated together, once we got in sync, in rhythm, once we became attuned to one another, I was able to pick him up and he would continue keeping his head out and his little legs moving. So then he's regulated. I'm regulated. He's regulated. But a lot of children who experience stress from a hypoaroused state are that same way. So what you have to do as a parent is you have to slow down. You have to breathe. You have to calm yourself down. Go at their pace, not at your pace. Go at their pace. Tracy says, "You are in the pocket, my friend." That's right. So you have to slow down. You have to go at their pace and connect. And sometimes, if they have a tendency to spend a lot of time in their bedroom, just knocking on the door and letting them know you're outside the room, can go a long ways. That's nonverbal communication. Or going into their room and sitting down and reading a book or a magazine or laying on the bed. You don't have to talk. You don't have to bother them. Just your presence can be enough. A lot of times we don't realize that just our presence is enough. So that study, very powerful, nonverbal communication. Our amygdala send vibrations. When you are stressed, your amygdala sends a vibration to your child's brain. When your child is stressed, they'll send a vibration to your brain. And those vibrations feed off of one another. So just keep that in mind. Just keep that little idea in mind. Keep your anxiety, keep your stress down when you're engaging your child, even your hyper-aroused children, because you're just going to dial their notch up even more. So then, now let's talk about that really powerful parenting technique that I want to share with you. It's called 10-20-10, and I came up with this probably 15 years ago. And what made me think about it was there was a research study at the time that came out and said that on average, children spend 12 minutes of quality time and attention with their parents every single day. That was the amount, and this was in the 90s. This is in the late 90s when this study came out. So think about that. This was before, cell phone, Facebook, YouTube, and apps and all that business. Back then, all we had were cell phones. I didn't even think we were texting back then. So think about how things have changed in that now 98, so the 20-year period of time. Oh my goodness. Think about how much things have changed and how that whole number has probably diminished even more. But then it was 12 minutes of quality time and attention. And I thought, my goodness. So if you're in a home with a stressed out child, which means the whole family's probably stressed out, that child's probably getting even less time than that. So they're not even getting the 12 minutes. And they're probably definitely not getting any affection, because touch is such a core regulatory need. So I thought, well, what if I split that up? What if I broke that up for parents? And then I actually gave them a time frame, and I had this one, I remember kind of playing with this back then. I had this one parent just set her hand on her daughter for 3 minutes. That was the time frame, because they weren't having any touch and they were stressed out all the time. I just had the mom lay her hand on her daughter for 3 minutes, and the mom thought it was so amazing that she laid her hand on her daughter for 3 minutes and her daughter didn't even mind. That was like the first touch that they had experienced, the first positive touch that they had experienced in a long time. So then I thought, well, you know what? Here's what I'm gonna have parents do. Because I don't want to just, do the average. I got to go beyond the average, because after all, we've got brains that are in a state of stress, and you've got to interrupt those patterns. You've got to create some prolonged states of regulation. So here's how 10-20-10 works. First thing in the morning, you give your child 10 minutes of time and attention. So, and affection. If you're at that place, you may not be at that place. Every child in every parent-child dyad is not in a place of having affection, because their stress is too high. And when we are stressed, we don't want to be touched. Touch is one of the most overwhelming ways to stimulate the frontal brain. And so we don't want to be touched when we're stressed. So you may not be there. You may have to build into that. Just by doing pass-bys, sight rubs and stuff, things of that nature, just slowing your pace. But you give your child 10 minutes of quality time and attention first thing in the morning. And so this means you get up earlier, and I usually get up during the week. I get up at 4 o'clock every morning, almost like clockwork. And I was getting up at 4:30, but the reason I like to get up at 4 is because I like to have my morning time, because I usually meet my friend at the gym at 5:30. So when I get up at 4, it gives me time to settle in, and, I have my cup of coffee, and I might do a little writing, or I might just kind of sit and be sleepy and meditative. It gives me time. So I would encourage you not necessarily to get up at 4 o'clock, but to get up a little bit earlier, give yourself a little bit of time, go into your child's room while they're still in bed, sit on the edge of the bed, rub their back, rub their hair. Now this is going to be the time when you can get some affection in with your child in the morning, because their window of tolerance is bigger. So your window of tolerance is bigger. So try to get your touch in then if you can, because getting that touch in is very important. So try to get that touch in if you can, first thing in the morning, before they ever get out of bed. You're nurturing them, you're loving on them. You give them that 10 minutes, and it doesn't have to be any longer than 10 minutes. And if you've got more children, and because I've worked with families who have had 13 children before, and the parents are like, how do I do 10-20-10 with all 13 of your children? Well, all 13 of your children don't need 10-20-10. This is important. The child who needs 10-20-10 is the child who is acting out the most, the child who is the most stressed out, the child who's got the weakest regulatory system. That's the child who needs 10-20-10. So that's the child that you want to really invest that time in. And then if you have multiple children, just split it up, because they're not getting that quality time and attention anyway. So split up the time. It doesn't, it could be 3-7-3. It doesn't matter what it is. It really is about the getting and taking the repetition, putting in the effort, and making the time to touch and making the time to connect and give your child the quality time. That's really what it's about, more than the actual time period. But I want to challenge you to do 10-20-10. I'm always offering up these little parenting tools, because something like 10-20-10, if you'll do it consistently for 2 weeks, you'll notice a 50% reduction in your child's worst behavior. Just that one parenting practice alone. If you can do 10-20-10 every day, and I know you can do it. I know you can do it. Just be committed to it. 10-20-10 every day for 2 weeks. Your child's worst behavior will reduce, if not completely go away. It will completely reduce by 50%, if not completely go away within that 2 week period of time, if you'll commit to it and be consistent. So it's 10 minutes first thing in the morning, quality time and attention. 20 minutes in the afternoon. As soon as your child gets home from school, or as soon as you get home from work, The TV goes off, you guys go for a walk, you put the magazine down, unless you're doing reading the magazine together. Doing homework together can actually count too. So that can count as a part of that 20. I used to love doing homework with my daughters, to sit down with them, because it's a time when I could probably get a handle in the back, and I could get a little handle on top of the hand, and I could do a problem, and they could do a problem, and I could do a problem, and it's just a really good regulatory time, and they get to take out that stress that they don't, that they've carried over from school. So I get to regulate them. So 20 minutes in the afternoon, and then 10 minutes in the evening before bed, right? So that's another time where maybe a bedtime story works perfect. Maybe a foot rub. Give your child a foot rub. I mean, gosh, get them conditioned for rubbing your feet now, so they'll want to rub your feet. It'll be just second nature when, you get older and your feet really hurt. Then it'll be second nature for them to just rub their feet, for them to rub your feet. So you give them a foot rub, teach them about that comfort with affection and with touch. And then when you get older and they get older, they can rub your feet for you. So give them a foot rub, give them a back rub, a massage. Children love that touch. And if you're not there, that's okay. Don't beat yourself up about it. Just be present to your child. It could be as simple as you may have to sit on the floor or sit on a chair outside their bedroom with the door closed while they're in the bedroom. Knock on that door and say, hey, I'm here. I'm going to hang out here for about 10 minutes. If you want me to come in, I'd love to. But if not, I'm just going to hang here and be with you. And just give your child 10 minutes of positive vibrations and thoughts and prayers and love and gratitude and joy, and just embrace them, wrap them in a light of just love and joy for that 10-minute period of time. Force yourself to do it. You will be amazed at how powerful the intensity of that love vibration can be through that wall. Like, even if you're at that place where you are, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the greatest relationship and 1 being no relationship at all, if you're like a 1 or a 2, you will be surprised how powerful you setting outside that wall of your child's bedroom and letting them know that you're out there and that you're going to commit to this 10 minutes, how powerful that will be. So you can do that. That's 10, 20, 10. Do that for 2 weeks consistently. Don't miss a day. You don't miss a day, right? I want you to commit to it. I want you to commit to it. I want you to do it. I want you to mark it down. And I want you to hit me back in 2 weeks when you've done it. And I want you to tell me about the magic that has occurred in your life. That is what feeds me. That's how I get fed. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. That's what makes me passionate to continue showing up, sharing with you guys, and encouraging you and inspiring you. And that's it, guys. Remember, in any situation, we always have 2 choices. We can continue to react from our same old imprints of fear and overwhelm and stress, and we can do the same thing that was done to us, or we can stop. We can take 3 to 10 deep breaths. We can slow down, and we can choose love. God bless you. I hope you lay down tonight. I hope your body is released of stress and cortisol and hormones that have you feeling uptight and anxious and scared and worried and overwhelmed. I hope it is just released from your body. And I hope tomorrow when you wake up, you feel light, you feel refreshed, you feel renewed, you feel inspired, and most of all, you feel in love. Choose love, and Big Papa will see you again tomorrow.